one of the most asked questions, which board to opt for?
Depends on what you want for your child.
One word for the future of education.
I would say dynamic, growing, dynamic.
AI an opportunity or disruption?
An opportunity, most certainly. I don't think any part of our lives is now untouched by AI. So
One advice for the Gen Zs or the Gen Alpha of today.
I would say learn to accept failure as a part of your journey.
One skill that every child must learn today.
The ability to cope with the unpredictable, resilience.
What kind of strategies and teacher training programs have you included in your schools?
For me, capacity building is a complete negotiable.
Hello and welcome to Bigger Picture with Ridhi. Education right now is going through massive shifts. We're seeing how we're moving away from marks and memorization to deeper understanding of concepts, thinking, and skills. As a parent, as an education enthusiast, and somebody who's building in this space, I often ask myself, are we truly preparing our children for the future, or we're still holding on to systems that are designed for the past? In today's podcast, we will be answering some of those questions. Have honest conversations with people who are building and shaping this education sector, taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture. I'm Ridhi Agarwal, an entrepreneur, an educationist, and somebody who is a parent to a toddler. Welcome to Bigger Picture with Ridhi. Today, we're delighted to have with us Dr. Neeta Bali, a passionate educationist who has been in this space for almost 40 years. With over 4 decades of experience, she's currently serving as a director with a group of schools in Delhi NCR. She's worked with reputed institutions like Kasiga School, GD Goenka, Seth Anandram Jaipuria, and Podar International. Dr. Neeta Bali, ma'am, it's truly a pleasure and an absolute delight to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much, Ridhi, and it's a delight and an honor to be on your first podcast.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So you've been in this industry for almost 40 years. Tell me how you've seen this education landscape being evolved, and what are the things that have actually transformed and some of the things that are still a challenge in today's industry?
Sure. Well, as you rightly said, I've been around for more than 4 decades now, initially as a classroom teacher, subsequently as an administrator with some large groups, the APJ group, the GD Goenka Group, the Podar Group, Kasiga School, and Seth Anandram Jaipuria. And of course, I've seen the whole education landscape undergo a major change. When I started teaching in the year 1983, as a hardcore classroom teacher in a school called Martyrdom in Delhi, where I was head of department English, the classroom transaction was very, very didactic. I mean, I would use the term didactic because the classroom transaction focused more on the teacher. It was teacher-centric learning. It was textbook-oriented learning. The focus was not so much on the learner. The focus was more on the content and the teacher. So I think that is one shift that has happened beautifully over a period of time. I've seen this transformation happen. Things have moved from teacher-centric learning to student-driven learning. Often, we talk about the teacher talk time, or we call it the TTT. The teacher talk time used to be 70% back then.
Wow.
But I think it's reduced now considerably, and maybe it's between 40 to 50%. Ideally, it should be about 30%. STT or student talk time should be more. It should be 70%. But the shift is happening, and it's very, very visible in the way classroom transactions are happening now. And I think the focus is more on student-centric learning, less on teacher-driven learning. The other thing is, I think there was generally a lot of focus on assessment, which was marks-driven.
Yeah.
Right? But I think we have changed now as educators. We also understand that we talk about 21st century skills. To my mind, they're not really 21st century skills. They're perennial skills, skills of articulation, skills of collaboration, skills of problem solving, and so on and so forth. So I think now the shift is happening to skill-driven learning rather than content-driven learning. So children are no longer learning by rote, regurgitating in the examination, getting marks, and getting applauded for it. I think the shift is happening now. The shift is slowly moving towards skill driven learning.
Yeah.
And of course, continuous and continuum in assessment, which again is a major shift because it's not about, one annual 3 hour examination where you may not perform well. Now, I think we're making a shift to assessment, which is continuous
Continuous.
assessment. So you are assessing children's learning over a period of time.
Throughout the year.
So it is not about assessment for testing. It is assessment now more for learning.
For learning. Formative assessments,
Formative
as we
assessment,
say.
absolutely.
No, you've beautifully put it. And CBSE also talks about how we're moving away from competition to competencies.
Right.
So if you can shed some light on that, that are schools really ready to adopt this? Because it requires that mindset shift, not just for schools, but also parents. Parents and students के लिए होता है कि marks ही सब कुछ है.
Right.
तो क्या वो mindset shift आ रहा है और उसके लिए क्या required है schools को करना?
So, Ridhi, here is the thing. You're talking about a mindset shift. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right.
Yeah.
The focus has to move completely from marks. I'm not saying we need to undermine the importance of academic rigor.
Yeah.
And that academic rigor can only be gauged by looking at a student's performance in an assessment, be it an exam or a formative assessment. But at the same time, we as parents and educators need to realize that let's not just focus on the marks that reflect on a report card. Let us also talk about, have we managed to ingrain in the children the skills and competencies that they need to survive in the real world?
Right.
Some time ago, I had written an article for a university, and I had very clearly stated in that, a very good marks and a great looking transcript can get you to a great college.
Yeah.
And to a great job. All right, a great degree can get you to a great job. But whether you're going to survive and thrive in the job will depend essentially on the skills that you bring to the table. Because you may not thrive, you may not survive, and you may not thrive and flourish. So I think right from the word go, we need to make that shift. Parents need to understand. Let us not overemphasize the importance of marks. As I said, I'm not undermining the importance of academic rigor or marks, but at the same time, let us allow children also to assimilate the skills that they need. And let us give them opportunities that match their inherent abilities, their inherent talent, and aptitude, personality, and interest.
Yeah.
So let us use API tests which help us determine the aptitude of the children, the personality, and their interests, and let us align their learning with that. And if that happens, I think children are going to succeed. There are some who are very mediocre and have very mediocre transcripts, but they manage to definitely supersede those who may have done very well initially because they have learnt the skills that they need in the real work situation. So in the world of work, you need to build skills. So let us make that shift, and parents need to understand first. Let us not push the
aligning
kids.
parents is
Aligning
the
the
most
parents
important
is
right now.
having conversations with parents, frequent orientations with parents. The shift will only happen once you have those conversations and a dialogue with parents to help them understand the shift. Teachers are beginning to understand, schools are beginning to understand, but at the same time, I think there is need for very aggressive capacity building in schools because work happens in the trenches, right? Work doesn't happen on paper as policies. We can create the best policies in the world.
Absolutely.
But unless they really translate into
And
real life,
executed.
unless they're executed meticulously, or unless it percolates to the teachers and the learner, I don't think it will have the desired impact. So it is important to focus on capacity building. So every school owner and the government, all of us need to understand that you have to put aside a budget for capacity building. It is not supposed to be treated as something peripheral and an add-on. It is integral, important, and instrumental if you want the change to happen.
No, I think you've touched based a very important topic. One was on the skill building. What I'm seeing is like today we're living in a VUCA world, right? The volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. And now it's been coined as a Barney world, which is brutal. Now, according to you, what are the skills that are required for kids and children in today's age to really build on so that they're ready for this future world? Because it's so uncertain, it's changing very quickly. That change initially used to be slow, but now we're seeing that it's exponentially changing.
Right.
And some of the jobs don't even exist today that they're going to end up in.
Yes.
So, how are we really preparing our kids, and what are those key skills that are going to be required for the students to
Right.
be
Right.
really able to survive this world?
Sure. But personally, I feel that integration of technology in
Yeah.
education, technology for education, and technology in education.
Hmm.
Every young person, most young people are very tech savvy.
Yeah.
I know I'm using a cliche term and saying digital natives.
Digital natives,
Yeah,
yeah.
but they take to technology like fish to water.
Hmm.
So we have to capitalize on that.
Yeah.
We have to get them to use technology. And aren't all of us as teachers also, after the pandemic, after COVID, aren't all of us also using technology very effectively
Yeah.
and very frequently in teaching
We were
learning?
thrusted into
Yes,
using it, and
yes,
now
yes.
a
So
lot
I
of us
think
are pro.
everyone's got
Yeah.
accustomed. So
Yeah.
I think all of us need to understand
Hmm.
that technology, AI, are a given. Those are not dispensable. They are indispensable now. But at the same time, using AI and technology ethically, using it under controlled conditions, particularly for children, because creating firewalls so that they don't bump into content which is undesirable. But at the same time, the ability to use technology, the
Hmm.
ability to use tools, AI driven tools for teachers also, the ability to use AI driven
Yeah.
platforms
Yeah.
is just so important. So I think one, of course, is the use of technology. And two, most important, I think, is the fact that children need to be resilient.
Yeah.
What generally happens is we saw that in COVID, a lot of kids just buckled because when they were confined to their homes, closeted in their homes,
Hmm.
a lot of them were coping with a lot of emotional turbulence. So, resilience,
Yes.
to understand that change is the only constant, adaptability. I think the other things definitely are a given, as I said, skills of articulation, skills of collaboration, the ability to work in groups,
Together.
yeah, with
Yeah.
other people. Because COVID,
Empathy.
empathy,
Yeah.
absolutely, the human factor, empathy. So people have been talking about, we talk about emotional intelligence. I would go a step further. I would talk about tenacity.
Hmm.
Children need to have tenacity
Yeah.
and resilience. So unless we build that tenacity and resilience in children, they may not have the other skills, but they're not likely to succeed if they're going to buckle under pressure. Because I find a lot of young people coping with, grappling with,
Yeah.
stress that they cannot
Anxiety.
manage, the ability of to be able to manage stress. So I would go one step further and I'd say spiritual quotients. I think it is very important for us to understand that the SQ or the spiritual quotients is also very important,
Hmm.
because I'm not talking about religion per se.
Yeah.
I am talking about spirituality. The ability to cope can only come when you are sound within,
At
when you are
peace.
get peace with yourself
Yeah.
and with the world. You're likely to perform better. We all know that as adults as well. So EQ, yes. IQ, great. EQ, important, but so's SQ. So let us also incorporate in our teaching learning a certain degree of spiritual quotients so that children are able to cope with what they may be confronted with in this VUCA world, as you said. And you've gone one step further and called it brutal. Brutal it is.
Yeah.
So, how would you survive in this brutal world unless you take charge of yourself? So, I
Yes.
think that is very
No,
important.
thank you so much for putting this across. I think even meditation, right, finding that anchor. A lot of
Yes.
schools are
Yes.
having dedicated time where
Yes.
students can just meditate and
Yes.
find peace, because there's so many distractions out there, so much of
Absolutely.
exposure. At least at our times, we didn't have this social media, or we didn't seek so much of validation. But students at an early age, formative years, are seeking
Yes.
validation,
Validation.
are having insecurities, are
Yes.
struggling
About, yeah.
with discipline, uh, pressure,
Yes.
right? Exam anxiety,
Yes.
which
Yes.
was not a term that was say used before, but
Maybe we didn't use the term Ridhi, but I'm
yeah,
sure a lot of us would have had anxiety on
yeah,
account of exams and other things.
yeah.
But maybe we were not so familiar with these terms back then.
And now I think CBSE is also making some policy shift where we're seeing two board examinations, right, for
Yeah.
grade 10. So do
Yeah.
you think that's a shift that will help students to reduce that exam pressure?
I should think so, provided the schools will implement it. It's not very convenient to implement something like that. Although, honestly speaking, I think this two exam pattern has existed forever. If you look at the international curricula, if you look at the IB or you look at Cambridge, children have always had the opportunity to write their exams in November and then in April and May. So that has always existed. And I found that very useful as somebody who headed a large international school. I found that a very, very useful practice because children were able to, sometimes they were able to clear off some exams in the month of November and some then in the month of May, April and May. So I think it's a beautiful concept, provided schools are ready to implement it. Because organizing any kind of an exam on such a large scale, there are logistical problems.
Teacher
Right?
resources.
Yeah, teacher resources, because when teachers are pulled out to either invigilate or evaluate scripts, it takes away a substantial amount of time from their teaching hours. So there are logistical problems, but definitely it's in the favor of the children. It'll ease the pressure. For example, somebody doesn't want to appear in the first set of exams. They may have a little additional time to prepare for the exams. So when you look at their level of preparedness, I think it's worth its while, and schools should implement it in spite of the logistical problems.
Right. Now that the new academic session has begun, I think one of the most asked questions from parents while they were choosing a school for their child was which board to opt for. You have plethora of options, IB, CBSE, ICSE, Cambridge. So firstly, how do each of these boards differ? And how should parents make that decision? What is the best for their child?
So here is the thing, Ridhi. Depends on what you want for your child, because each board represents a different style of learning. Let me talk first about IB and Cambridge. If I were to talk about IB, it runs four beautiful programs. There is PYP, and there's MYP, there's IBDP, and IBCP now, right? The focus in the IB curriculum is essentially on research. So students are expected, it is never focused, it's not textbook driven at all.
Yeah.
So that's one. The focus is on research, unlike the national board, which is not so researched or research oriented. If I were to talk about the CBSE, definitely is not as research oriented, let us say, as the international baccalaureate. The other is transdisciplinary learning. Now, if I were to talk about PYP, it is based on units of inquiry, So definitely there is transdisciplinary learning, because we understand as educators, we should understand as educators, that learning never happens in silos. So there is transdisciplinary learning, right? Children should be able to make connections.
So can you give an example of
For
what
example,
you mean?
if I were to pick up any one theme, let us say if I pick up the theme money,
Okay.
money is going to be taught across language, that is English and Hindi. It will be taught across math, also across social science and science. For example, if I were to talk about calculations, it would be taught in math. If I were to talk about the genesis of money, how did money come into being? We started with the barter system.
Yeah.
Probably that will go to social science or environmental science. And definitely the same thing can be explained in science also. Now, what kind of materials have been used over a period of time to create?
How is the currency changed?
Yeah, how was the coins created? What kind of metals were used to create the coins? How did the currency notes come into being?
Yeah.
Right? And so is language. Language also can focus on, maybe stories which are woven around the theme money. So it's transdisciplinary learning. So you have to make connections, right? You choose a theme. You don't teach a subject in isolation. So you're able
that
to
is
make
very
connections.
focused on IB curriculum.
Right.
And are we seeing that in CBSE as well?
But before we go to the
Yeah.
CBSE, I'd very quickly also
Yes.
like to talk about one thing which stands out where IB and Cambridge are concerned. A large part of assessment is IA, or
Okay.
internal assessment, right? So generally what happens is the IA comprises, let us say if I'm studying economics as a subject. So in econ, you will have commentaries, economic commentaries, or you'll have case studies in B&M, business and management. Only part of the assessment is end of the year examination. A large chunk is IA. Now that reduces the pressure on the learner, because the IA is focusing on research and creating a research paper. And only part of the assessment is end of the year examination. So the learning is a consistent process,
Yeah.
because you're researching for information and you're making presentations.
A lot of student agencies
Yes,
involved.
student age, absolutely. I
Yeah.
think you've clinched it.
Yeah.
The student agency in most
Very
international
high.
curricula is very, very strong. So I would say CBSE is slowly moving towards that. Of course,
Yeah.
there are case studies and subjects like business studies and almost all subjects. And now I think there'll be a greater shift with the changes that have happened in
Yes.
grade 9. There'll be a much greater shift. The fact that Kaushal Bodh has been introduced,
the
Kaushal
skill
Bodh,
lab.
which is in grade 6, 7, and 8.
Hmm.
I think that's a clear indicator that even national curriculum is slowly moving towards skill-driven learning.
Yes.
So all these changes will definitely result in very, very positive impact that will happen in children's learning. And likewise, Cambridge also, there is transdisciplinary, there's interdisciplinary learning. Not so much transdisciplinary, but interdisciplinary learning. And again, the level of IA or internal assessment is not as large as in IB, but definitely fairly sufficient. But for that matter, in CBSE, I think now the shift is happening. The curriculum is moving away from textbook-oriented approach and moving more towards student-centric approach and skill-based approach.
Skill-based.
So slowly that is also now shifting.
So from what I understand, that IB is less of content driven,
Yes.
more of skill, practical, real life application.
I wouldn't
And-
say it's less of content.
Okay.
In terms of richness of content, I would say IB and Cambridge both. If we were to talk about, for example, we are transacting Cambridge early years. I find that content is age appropriate, beautifully graded, age appropriate, and the focus is on DAP. DAP is developmentally appropriate practices.
Okay.
So this is very important. This is very important, and all schools should be mindful of this. Let us not force the children to write cursive in very young classes. Their fingers are tender. Let us move to a style of writing which is a print style of writing. All right. So I guess all of us as educators have to change our mindset. It's not about the beauty of the letters.
Yeah.
It's about how much stress are the children able to take when writing those letters. So you have to make those shifts to DAPs, developmentally appropriate practices. So that shift is happening now slowly in CBSE as well. I think that
Yeah.
shift is starting to reflect.
And the most important would be, again, capacity building,
Yes,
because a lot of
yes.
focus on pedagogy. How do we
Yes, yes.
deliver
Yes.
more again?
Yeah.
So what kind of strategies and teacher training programs have you included in your schools? Because we know that, they've been doing wonderfully well. So how much of a focus is there on capacity building in teacher training programs, and what strategies have you incorporated?
Sure. So here is the thing. For me, capacity building is a complete non-negotiable and an integral part of my work. So we create a capacity building calendar, which is a year-long calendar based on TNI. So training needs identification, or TNI as I call it. We have a TNI. After we are done with the TNI and we have understood, and the TNI is also based on the CROs. I don't know if these terms may not be familiar to a lot of people. A CRO is a classroom observation. So based on a year-long classroom observation, we are able to create a TNI after looking at the CROs or the classroom observations and after having conversations with teachers, so that we can understand what is it that they're looking for. And when we do capacity building in 1 year, whatever capacity building I've done, I've taken a feedback from the teachers about how effective was that capacity building, whether it was done by me and my team or it was done by an extraneous resource. We asked the teachers to give us a clear, candid feedback so that we can create a TNI. Based on the TNI, we create a year-long capacity building calendar. So capacity building calendar also will cater to teachers of different sections. The capacity building calendar for, let us say, the Cambridge early years will be very, very different from what I do for classes, let's say 1 to 10 or 11 and 12. So we touch on everything that we feel is important. What is, let us say, things like what is active learning?
Yeah.
All right. How to identify, for that matter, how to identify children with learning challenges, because one size fits all doesn't work.
Absolutely.
So it touches on just about everything to do with the pedagogy. Now, for example, we have just introduced Kaushal Both like any other
Yeah.
school. So we have done 2 or 3 workshops on Kaushal Both to
Hmm.
help the teachers understand what is Kaushal Both and how is it to be implemented. And the important thing is to engage the teachers. Now, for example, I was doing a workshop on Kaushal Both. We made sure we appointed lead resource persons from each school who are part of a core team that designed the Kaushal Both curriculum and activities. We designed the activities which are going to be the same across the 3 schools that I'm associated with. So when you involve
the
teachers,
teachers, yeah. They
yeah,
take ownership and
they
accountability.
take the ownership. So the
Yeah.
important thing is everyone should take ownership, for the learning that happens in the classrooms. And when teachers are engaged, they feel they're very important stakeholders.
Absolutely. They are the backbone.
They are the backbone.
Yeah. Ma'am, traditionally, we've always seen that the relationship between the school and parents is built on trust. And recently, with those incidents and protests outside school, there has been a bit of a strain in that relationship between parents and schools. So, firstly, why do you think that is happening? And what can schools do or even parents do in order to build that trust again?
So the important thing is, one, parents have a lot of choices today. With the number of schools, particularly private schools, growing, parents have a lot of choices and they can make an informed decision about the kind of school that they want to send their child to. Because sending your child to a school is a huge leap of faith, right? So you have to choose the right school. Schools need to understand this, that it is a huge leap of faith. They have reposed faith in us, and therefore we must live up to their expectations and their faith. Two, I think all of us as schools and parents need to understand we are on the same side of the table.
Yeah, we want the
We are
best for
not
the child.
adversaries, because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, both of us want the same thing. We want the well-being of the child. We want their cognitive, physical, emotional growth. So if you're on the same side of the table, we are not adversaries. We need to understand that. And there shouldn't be a tug of war. Sri Ridhi, I personally feel, and I have been doing it and very successfully, I think we need to create forums where the parents and the school are able to have a conversation and a dialogue. Now, for example, I, for one, have always believed, there are concepts of coffee mornings. Call in the parents for a quick coffee with you and have open conversations
This is with the
them.
leaders or with the
With the
teachers?
school leaders, generally with the school leaders and also with the teachers. So we involve the teachers as well, and parents are allowed an open platform where they can speak about their concerns and definitely give constructive suggestions about how both the parents and the school can move forward. Both schools and parents need to understand that you have to work in tandem. You cannot work in isolation. So it's really not about a tug of war. And parents, I firmly believe parents should have a voice. Give them
very
a platform. I organize coffee mornings. We have something called a triangular conference,
Okay.
where we have the school management, which is represented by me and principals. We have teachers and we have children. We speak about, everyone's allowed to freely speak about whatever they want to speak about. But at the same time, let us also exercise a certain degree of finesse when we do these, when we have these meetings or conversations. But conversations are very important. And I think it's good to listen to each other, because parents should be able to put forth their perspective and school should show empathy for a parent's perspective. That is very, very important. And likewise, I think the parents also need to understand the challenges a school may be grappling with.
Yeah.
So it's a two-way process. As long as we keep these channels of communication open, I don't think there will be any conflict or any acrimony.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think this is where empathy comes in, understanding that the intention is at the right place.
Right.
And if one is, they just want to be heard.
Yes.
Parents just want to be heard. And once they're able to put forth their opinions, I think trust will automatically come in.
No, moreover, Riddhi, I think a
Yeah.
lot of parents, particularly those who are professionals, come with a lot of experience in their respective fields, and that can be leveraged to the advantage of the
Yeah.
school. It's important to have a PPP, or we call it a parent partner program.
Right. Parent as
Yeah,
partners.
parent
Yeah.
as partners in the learning of the children. And that's most important. Engage your parents in day-to-day activities in the school. Give them an opportunity to be a part of the learning of the children. For example, something like a parent powerhouse in an early years allowed the parents to come in and actually experience the learning that happens in the classroom by attempting activities that their children are doing collaboratively with their children. So when parents become part of the learning of a child's school day-to-day affair, school regimen, I think they also learn to identify with the challenges. They can understand the challenges the school may be experiencing, and they can give very valuable suggestions with their own experiences,
Yeah.
from their respective fields. They, I think, can contribute in a big way. We often have parents also come and take sessions for the older children,
Okay.
career counseling sessions, because a working professional can really bring a beautiful perspective to a set of students who are aspiring. Let us say a chartered accountant who runs a chartered accountancy firm or works with a big firm is addressing students who are studying commercial studies, is able to help them understand what the day in life of a chartered accountant looks like. So let us involve parents. The moment you involve parents, I think half the battle is won.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Ma'am, I think Indian education system, the scale of Indian education system is itself staggering, right? We have more than 250 million students
Right.
in our K to 12 sector.
Right.
And every year we're adding 25 million kids into the education sector, which is
Right.
almost like adding a new Australia
Yes.
into the
Yes.
ecosystem.
Yes.
Are we ready for this scale? Is India equipped to handle this kind of scale? Do we have enough schools? Do we have enough resources, infrastructure? So, what's your take on this?
See, if I were to talk about the scale of, the scale at which the education landscape is growing, we know that it is only the numbers will keep burgeoning. So you
Yeah.
need to create infrastructure. The government needs to understand that it needs to focus primarily on educating and education, good quality education in not so much in private schools, but in government schools, good quality education, good teachers, good infrastructure, and definitely, an ecosystem which is able to keep pace with the changing trends. So the government needs to allocate more resources and more budgets. It needs to invest in teacher training, definitely. And the other thing I feel is that the private players in education are contributing in a big way. So they need support.
Yeah.
Those who are starting their own schools, the private players in the market, they need support from the government in terms of policies, in terms of any roadblocks that these investors are facing when they are investing in big schools. But at the same time, they also, that is, those who are running private schools, will also need to contribute to the well being of those who are the underprivileged. They should be able to put away some part of what they, and what funds they create on those students who are not able to afford this kind of education or infrastructure or educational tools and resources. So definitely catering, we have to take a very, very balanced approach. But I think both need to be looked at very carefully, increasing the funds, increasing the budgets for government schools, creating good infrastructure, making sure that teachers in every classroom and their books for these children, because that these free books, free uniforms, free meals, and the kind of meals that are given, also good quality meals. And at the same time, like I said, the private schools need to be boosted. The owners of these schools need support, and they should be supported in every possible way by the government. And definitely, one needs to, of course, also be very mindful that whatever they create should not cater only to a privileged few, that those who are underprivileged, also some part of that should also go to the underprivileged.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for these valuable insights. Um, One other topic that I want to touch base is that we're moving away from that one size fits all approach
Right.
and rote memorization to mastery learning and personalization.
Right.
So, how do you think that artificial intelligence and technology can really help in bringing personalization into the education ecosystem? What will be the role of an educator in the classroom now that technology is coming into the classrooms? And how can students and schools meaningfully integrate this?
We are talking about personalized learning. We are talking about, not moving towards one size fits all. I mean, those are bygone days. You can't talk about one. I think we need to identify different learners, different kinds of learners with different learning styles. That's one. We also need to look at children, who have varying capacities. So you need to customize the learning materials and assessments to cater to all kinds of learners. Some may be very strong, their numeracy skills may be very strong, but their linguistic skills may not be so strong. But at the same time, everyone deserves to learn, and each one is going to learn differently. So, different levels of assessment, different kinds of content, different levels of assessment that cater to the needs of individual children, and differentiation
Yeah.
in a classroom is very, very important.
So, how does one teacher in a classroom of 30 students can really cater to this differentiation?
In fact, this is something that comes up frequently.
Yeah.
First is identification. Let us identify different kinds of learners and their capacities, right, in a classroom. Teachers have to be taught. Two, we have to get them to understand that, let's say, if you're creating a worksheet,
Okay.
it'll have to be 2 or 3 different sets of worksheets. One which caters to accelerated learning. There's some very bright kids who finish their work first and need challenge. So accelerated teaching. At the same time, you also need to have something that caters to MLL, or minimum level of learning.
Yes.
So you have to have that differentiation in a classroom, because each child is going to learn differently. Having said that, the number of students in a classroom, the teacher-student ratio has to be ideal. Very often we are not able to manage that.
Average is
Yeah.
more than 30 students
yes.
in a
So
classroom.
it becomes really tough for any one teacher, particularly in the primary and the pre-primary levels. So I think the best thing to do is to control, probably sometimes to ensure that it is, if not perfect, near perfect student teacher ratio. And to create make sure teachers know about differentiation, and they create materials which are different for different sets of learners. It's a challenge, but I think it
I
needs
think
to
now
get done.
technology can really take over that.
Yes.
There are AI tools that are
Yes.
actually able to
Yes.
personalize the learning journey for students and take away this administrative task from
Absolutely.
teachers.
Very quickly, I'd like to mention here, the other day I was taking a workshop that is able to create just about everything.
Yeah.
So let us say, if I want to create an IEP, or an individualized education plan for a student who is struggling with a learning challenge, I'm able to do that in a fraction of a second. If I want to create differentiated worksheets, I can do it in a fraction of a second. I don't have to sit down and work at it manually. So it reduces the pressure. So that's where the role of AI comes in.
Yeah.
And believe you me, Ridhi, I think once you get teachers excited about the use of these AI tools, AI-driven platforms and AI tools, once smitten, they're not going back to manual work.
Thank you so much, Dr. Neeta Bali, ma'am, for these valuable insights. Now, coming to the rapid fire round, I would like to ask some questions and would love to know if you can
Sure.
give some one word answers here. One word for the future of education.
I would say dynamic, growing, dynamic, and and I'm very optimistic about. So I would just call it dynamic.
AI an opportunity or disruption?
An opportunity, most certainly, because I don't think any part of our lives is now untouched by AI. So AI in education, definitely a great opportunity.
Yeah.
Great opportunity.
One skill that every child must learn today.
The ability to cope with the unpredictable, resilience. I think that is
Wonderful.
one. Grit.
Great.
That's what I'd call it. Grit. That will stand them in good stead in the years to come.
Yeah. What will help India make Vikasit Bharat 2047?
The ability to use technology effectively in every sphere of life. So, technological intervention and the use of AI. in all spheres of our life. I think that definitely will help India become Viksit Bharat.
Absolutely. One advice for the Gen Zs or the Gen Alpha of today.
I would say, learn to accept failure as a part of your journey. Most of us give up when we fail. Let us remember, when we fail and we fall, that is not the end of the road. That is only an indicator to tell us that we need to change direction. So accept failure with the with equal optimism as you would your successes. So failure is not end of the road. Failure is an indicator that I need to change direction.
Yeah, wonderful. I read this somewhere that congratulations that you failed. Many don't even try.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's beautifully said. Yes,
Yeah.
true.
So that's the spirit that I think
Yes.
every Gen Alpha, Gen
Yes.
Z
Yes.
should inculcate.
Absolutely.
How take failures in your stride as an
Absolutely.
opportunity
Right.
to better yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. These conversations make one thing clear. Education is not just changing, it's being redefined. And the question that we need to answer is that are we ready to adapt fast enough for our children? Thank you so much, Dr. Neeta Bali, ma'am, for
Pleasure.
such valuable insights.
Pleasure.
It's truly a pleasure to have you here. Now, for more conversations moving away from marks to mastery, please follow us on The Bigger Picture with Ridhi. Thank you.